39%. That's how much more likely a divorced man is to die from any cause compared to a man who stayed married. Not 5%, not 10, 39. That comes from a meta-analysis by Kiecolt-Glaser and Newton published in Psychological Bulletin, covering decades of health data across thousands of subjects. And here's what makes that number so dangerous. Most divorced men have no idea they're carrying it. Because when a marriage ends, there's a script we all expect. Someone cries publicly, someone posts day one, absolutely devastated, someone gets the sympathy, the check-ins, the group chat rallying around them. And then there's the other person, the one who seems fine, goes to work, hits the gym, maybe downloads an app, and everyone assumes he's handling it. The research says that assumption is almost always wrong. Paul Amato's landmark 2000 study in the Journal of Marriage and Family tracked adults across a 5-year post-divorce window. Women reported higher acute distress in the first 6 months, sharper pain, more tears, more visible struggle. But by year 2, their trajectory bent upward. Men showed the opposite pattern, lower initial distress scores, then a plateau that refused to lift. A subset of men, and this is the part that matters, were still experiencing clinically significant distress after a full decade. Recovery is not symmetrical, and if you're a man over 40 watching this, that curve probably looks familiar even if you've never seen it drawn. Let's talk about why the delay happens. Stroebe and Schut's dual process, model of coping with bereavement, published in Death Studies in 1999, wasn't originally about divorce. It was about death. But researchers have since applied it extensively to marital dissolution because the grief mechanics are nearly identical. The model identifies 2 modes: loss-oriented coping, where you sit with the pain and process it, and restoration-oriented coping, where you rebuild routines and move forward. Women tend to oscillate between both. Men overwhelmingly default to restoration. They fix things, they stay busy, they skip the part where you actually feel it. Addis and Mahalik's 2003 review in American Psychologist found that men are 2 to 3 times less likely than women to seek professional help after a major life disruption, not because they don't need it, because masculine norms frame help-seeking as weakness. The study identified what they called the masculine dilemma of emotional socialization. Men are trained from adolescence to suppress vulnerability, and divorce is the moment that training becomes most dangerous. Sound familiar? That's not observation, that's projection. The person who looks worse on day 1 is often processing faster. The person who looks fine is often just performing. Here's the structural problem underneath the emotional one. Deborah Umberson and colleagues published a study in 2006 in the Journal of Health and Social Behavior that tracked how marriage functions as a social infrastructure, particularly for men. Their finding was blunt. Men rely disproportionately on their wives as their primary, and sometimes only, point of deep social connection. When the marriage ends, that connection doesn't just weaken. The entire network it was holding together collapses. 40%. That's how much the average man's social circle shrinks after divorce. And this isn't about losing mutual friends in the split, though that happens too. It's about the dinner party she organized, the couples they saw because she maintained the relationship, the emotional conversations that only happened because she initiated them. Men don't lose a wife. They lose an entire social operating system. McPherson, Smith-Lovin, and Brashears published a study in the American Sociological Review in 2006 that found American men averaged just 1.2 close confidants. Women averaged 3.4. After divorce, many men in the sample reported having no one they could talk to about something personal. Not one person. 0. That's not loneliness. That's social infrastructure failure. 75%. That's from a 2024 report covered by WBUR and Cognoscenti. 3 out of 4 fathers say they feel isolated, and divorce doesn't create that isolation from scratch. It exposes an isolation that was already there, hidden behind the architecture of marriage. This is the flow chart that Hetherington and Kelly mapped in their 2002 book, For Better or For Worse. They followed over 1,400 families through divorce and beyond. The acute adjustment phase, the chaos, the logistics, the raw shock, lasted 1 to 3 years for both genders, but full psychological recovery, a stable sense of self, rebuilt well-being, took 5 or more years, and men over 40 who had tied their identity to being a husband and father were the group most likely to stall, not because they were weaker, because they had fewer tools and fewer people pushing them to use the tools that exist. Look at that timeline. If you're a man sitting at month 8 thinking you're through the worst of it because the acute pain has faded, the data says you might be entering the most dangerous phase, the phase where it doesn't hurt sharply anymore. It just doesn't get better. I need to put a number on the screen that matters. Men account for nearly 80% of all suicide deaths in the United States. That's not a new statistic. It's held roughly steady for decades, according to the CDC's WISCARS database. But it becomes especially relevant in the context of divorce because divorced men are at significantly elevated risk compared to both married men and divorced women. Agustin Kposawa published a study in 2000 in the Journal of Epidemiology and Community Health using U.S. national mortality data. Divorced men had roughly twice the suicide risk of married men. Divorced women, about 1.3 times. The gap wasn't small, and Kposawa's analysis controlled for income, age, and race, meaning this wasn't explained away by financial ruin or demographics. Something about the combination of being male, being divorced, and being socially disconnected creates a compounding risk that the data cannot ignore. Stack and Scourfield's 2015 review in the Journal of Men's Studies confirmed the pattern. Social isolation was the single strongest predictor of suicidality in divorced men, stronger than income loss, stronger than custody outcomes, stronger than the divorce itself. The divorce is the trigger. The isolation is the mechanism. So what does the grief actually look like when it's happening and nobody, including you, recognizes it? It doesn't look like crying. Stroebe and Schut's model predicts exactly what clinicians observe. Men convert grief into what researchers call instrumental grieving. Instead of sadness, you get anger. Instead of withdrawal, you get overwork. Instead of processing, you get numbing, alcohol, screens, compulsive dating, anything that fills the silence. Kiecolt-Glaser and Newton's 2001 review in Psychological Bulletin connected these behaviors directly to health outcomes. Divorced men showed higher rates of cardiovascular disease, elevated cortisol, impaired immune function, and increased substance use, all markers of chronic, unresolved stress. The body keeps the score even when the mind insists everything's fine. 5 years. That's Hetherington and Kelly's number for full recovery, not feeling okay most days, but genuine psychological restabilization. And that's the median. For men over 40 who don't actively intervene in their own grief process, the tail stretches much longer. Let's build the framework, because the data doesn't just describe the problem, it maps the exit routes. Based on Stroebe and Schut's dual process model, Umberson's social infrastructure research, and Hetherington and Kelly's recovery data, here are the 5 interventions that actually shift the grief curve for men. Move 1. Name the pattern. You just saw the curve. You know it plateaus. Recognizing that you're on a known trajectory is itself an intervention. Hetherington found that men who understood their grief as a process, not a permanent state, showed faster recovery than men who white-knuckled through it. Move 2, rebuild one confidant, not a drinking buddy, not a gym partner, one person you can say the real thing to. McPherson's data showed that going from 0 confidants to 1 cut isolation-related distress nearly in half. Holt, Lundstad, and colleagues' 2010 meta-analysis in PLOS Medicine, covering over 300,000 participants, found that strong social relationships increased survival odds by 50%, not emotional well-being. Survival. Having one person to talk to isn't soft. It's statistically protective. Move 3, schedule the processing. Stroebe and Schut's model says you need both restoration and loss-oriented coping. Most men only do restoration. Blocking even 90 minutes a week for therapy, structured journaling, or grief-focused conversation forces the oscillation the model requires. Move 4, audit your health. Kiecolt-Glaser's data showed that health behavior changes, sleep deterioration, increased drinking, dropped exercise, were both symptoms of unprocessed grief and accelerants of it. Tracking them monthly gives you an early warning system. Move 5, the identity checkpoint. At 6 months post-separation, ask yourself one question. Who am I if I'm not a husband? Hetherington found that men who could articulate an identity beyond their marital role recovered significantly faster than those who couldn't. This isn't philosophy, it's a diagnostic. The full grief curve correction framework, with the confidant rebuilding guide, the health audit template, the identity checkpoint worksheet, and every study cited in this episode, is in the newsletter. Link in the description. First issue is free. If this changed how you think about what's actually happening underneath the I'm fine, subscribe. Every episode is built on data, not opinions. And if you know a man going through this right now, send him this video. The research says he probably won't ask for it himself. Next, the loneliness tax. What social isolation actually costs divorced men, in dollars, in years, and in health outcomes the data can now quantify. That's next week.